Come with me to a magical place where being labeled the pork queen is a compliment, where being nice is just a way of life, and where all leaders of the free world must pass through. Welcome to Iowa. Whether you're a current Iowan, an Iowa expat, or an Iowan at heart, this show is for you. This is the Iowa Podcast. Real Iowans, real talk, no drama. I'm Justin Brady, and today I'm joined by Bryan Etchen, the owner of Iowa Orchard. But you're not the founder. I almost said founder, but you're not the founder because I think your dad started Iowa Orchard, correct?
Yes, he did. It was probably the mid-'70s. I need to research that because we're probably coming up on a 50-year anniversary. So, probably about 50 years.
So there are a lot of Iowa apple picking related questions I'm going to go through today. Why is the Honeycrisp so expensive, by the way? We're going to get into that one too. But before we do, everybody follow or subscribe to the show on your player. We're in Apple Podcasts. We're in Spotify, all the players. Also, give this show 5 stars. That does something to all the platforms and helps them serve up the show to more people in the state of Iowa, more people who have like-minded interests. So make sure to do that as well. So it is Iowa apple picking season. And, okay, is it in my imagination, or are apples that you pick yourself locally, do they taste better? Because my wife and I swear they taste better.
Well, they should. Almost every orchardist I know of does not apply a food grade wax to their fruit. And at least that would be hard to do on the tree. But as far as we don't have too many packing sheds in the state, if any. So, yeah, the key is leaving the apple on the tree for its full sugar development. When you let that happen and you're not worried about distribution or storage for a year, you're only worried about consumption. That's the best way to have perfectly tasting fruit.
Okay, so I'm not familiar with food grade wax. So when we're like cleaning apples in the sink and running them under cold water, if they're store bought, right? It has that waxy kind of coating. So that's actual wax. That's not in my imagination.
No, that's correct. An apple has a natural wax on it, that it produces itself. But when you have a packing house or a big wholesaler, they're concentrating on pressure testing the apple when it's on the tree, seeing if it's going to withstand, months and months and months of cold storage. So they're picking them a little bit, I don't want to say unripe side, but I feel before they get their full flavor. And then they will, obviously run them through a shed that discovers the faulty apples that get discarded, right, or used in cider and things like that. And then the good ones, they'll put a wax on them to seal in that moisture and really? Hopefully keep the apple for a long time. Okay,
that was totally off my radar. I had no idea. Okay, I'm assuming it's safe because you mentioned it was a food grade wax, and I'm not going to bash on store-bought apples too much because obviously any sale in the apple industry as a whole is good for, the growers, but what is this stuff? It's just a sealer, and when we rinse our apples, does that come off? And then we'll obviously move on to more important stuff.
Well, let's back up just a hair and let's talk about, you're right, 100%. Grocery stores serve their purpose. Absolutely. We need that fruit in the other months of the year. Keeps a viable industry going, and we would much rather be putting fruit in our body than fast food in our body. It's always going to be a healthier thing. I'm not really sure, but I'm assuming that, yeah, it can come off. It probably takes, I don't know, hot water, but it's not harmful or anything. It's just to seal in the moisture of the fruit. So.
Sure. Okay. There was an interview you did in Farm Bureau years ago, and you mentioned something interesting that really wasn't on my radar, but you have a U-pick in Granger. We're going to get into Granger a little bit. When opening this, you told the Iowa Farm Bureau you were a bit nervous. Why were you nervous a little bit to open this Granger U-pick area?
Well, there are 3 sizes of trees. You have dwarf, semi-dwarf, and standard. And that directly relates to the size of the trees. We used to grow everything on a semi-dwarf, which was a pretty large tree. And we used to do pick your own 30 years ago on our semi-dwarf trees in Urbandale. And we stopped doing it because, people would need ladders, they would be dumb and climb the trees and things like that. And now that we have dwarf trees, all the fruit is low, and that makes it easy for picking. But we were a little worried about the trellis system and people, we were just a little hesitant about it. But when we did it, wow, it was a game changer for us. We do lose a lot of fruit on the ground from the public, so that's not a good thing, but it's really turned into something that we love to have and to, invite the community to come do.
No, I get that, right? Like anytime you have professional growers and you have your systems and processes in place and you know how to treat the trees and you have that system, it is a bit nerve-wracking when you invite the general public. Most people are fine, but then you get, I guess I could say, those bad apples that can spoil the bunch, right? So I get it.
It's kind of what we've promoted this year with our Pick Your Own. We say the apples are essentially the same price as our storeroom, as our sales room. And the reason for that is our pickers, we're able to pick every apple and grade that and then use the seconds for cider and pies, which we do tons of cider and pies. So
Right.
Once the apple hits the ground, it's pretty much useless. When the public picks, they're asked to look at the apple before they pick it. But if they pick it and they see that it's not one that they want, then that's what they do. So
Sure, it's a bit more difficult. Anytime you have the general public come to anything, it's a bit more difficult, right? I did go to the orchard, by the way, the You Pick orchard in Granger, and you just threw out a tip that I think is probably off most people's radar. You mentioned your trellis system. I don't think at least most Americans are familiar with a trellis system in an apple orchard, because we mostly picture these bigger trees that you have to, like you indicated, lean up or get a pole to pick. At the Granger location, it kind of reminded me more like a winery. What's up with the trellis system, and why don't we see this that much?
it's pretty state-of-the-art concept anyway. That was my first go around, so it's not the best trellis out there. But as Americans, I don't want to say behind the curve, but we're learning from the Europeans, the Italians. They're the ones that really spearheaded this because they have such little space to work with. But the idea of the dwarf tree on a trellis system, it's much more efficient acreage-wise. And not only that, it grows a much larger, cleaner fruit because you have less spraying inputs, which is a big deal to the American consumer. And it's just I had one customer tell me the new trellis that we built in Urbandale. She said, yeah, the word on the street, it's kind of funny. This gal was about 85 years old, and she's telling me the word on the street. It was just kind of cracked me up. The word on the street is you're turning into a vineyard. And I said, no, that's just a really tall trellis system for dwarf apple trees. And I said, wait till next year when we fruit those trees, and it will be spectacular.
So do you have to train these trees then to, just like a vineyard, do you have to train these trees to like follow your trellis system? Because it's like some wires suspended between some thicker wooden poles. Do you have to train the trees somehow?
Yeah, actually, that's a really good question. I didn't know we would get that technical, but if you want to grow
Welcome to the Iowa
fruit,
podcast, Bryan.
Yeah, I know. Justin can be technical from time to time. So yeah, if you're, it's really a race to grow the tree to the top of the trellis, because we plant a tree every 3 feet or even less, 2.5 feet when it comes to Honeycrisp.
Wow.
And you don't want the trees to fruit until they really reach the top of that trellis. And then it makes not an apple tree, but more like a fruiting wall. And when you're training it to the wires are just basically support for the tree itself because of the wind. We found that out in 2007. I won't go into that, but there was wind shear that leveled about 10,000 trees.
Oh my gosh, this is 2007?
Yeah, yeah. We had 2 wind shear events in about 2 weeks in July. They were full of fruit, ready to go, and we didn't have good trellis on them. And yeah, but that's what the trellis is for. It's for training the trees, because if you just let the branch grow, it's going to want to grow to the sun. And what you want to do is bend it down so that it says, oh, I need to stop growing and grow fruit. So that's what it does.
Do you like tie it? Do you like tie these branches to direct them in another area? Because I'm assuming if we drive by Iowa Orchard in the off season, we're not going to see you out there like holding tree limbs.
Well, you can, yeah, correct. There's 4,000 trees in Urbandale and 10,000 trees in Granger, so that would be tiresome, I think.
You need a lot of people for that.
Usually, you can prune them into position the first 2 years, but after that, when they start to fruit, the fruit actually might pull it down as a weight. But some of them are very obviously need to be tied to the wire. So yeah, we do that. We use really thin filament wire, and we just bend the limb and attach it to the main trellis wire.
Now, is the only reason for doing that just to make picking easier, or are there other advantages to turning your apple orchard into more of a trellis system / winery looking spot?
It's not to make picking easier, it's to make picking sooner. So we can fruit the apple trees in 2 years.
Wow.
With a full crop in that 3rd or 4th season. So the whole idea is some trees grow to the top of the trellis, which is what we want, be faster than other trees. They're more vigorous, so they grow faster. And some are just like, everybody wonders, why is Honeycrisp $4 a pound in the stores, or whatever price they charge? The main reason is not just that it's a unique apple, it's the hardest tree to grow. It wants to grow very slow. So usually Honeycrisp take about 3 or 4 years to get into production.
I was curious about that because it's always been difficult, not just at your orchard. I've been to some other orchards in random places too. And it's almost like no one's ever allowed to pick the Honeycrisp, right? And I was like, what is the, these must be a really temperamental and difficult to grow apple. And that's it right there. It just takes a long time to grow them.
Honeycrisp is the literal bane of existence. Everything wants it. Everything. Deer want it. Japanese beetles want it. Birds want it. So, and a Honeycrisp tree is a very ugly tree. The fruit on it, you know, what you see is gorgeous that we have in the store, but that's because we've sorted through, you know, what the birds and Japanese beetles have left us. Oh. And when people come to the pick your own and they go through a Jonathan row and 99% of the apples are perfect, and then they go over to a Honeycrisp row and then they wonder, why are only half of the apples perfect? It's because we're still learning. We are about as far south as you can grow Honeycrisp commercially. Most guys won't go further south than us and try to grow it, which is why you don't see many major orchards in southern Iowa. It's so difficult to grow. It's so difficult to keep clean.
I know it's really funny because everyone does want them, right? Like people want them, Japanese beetles want them, deer want them. That's really funny. They're only in like a northern. I can't imagine they're growing them in Canada, are they? Like what zone or like how far south? They are. They're growing them in Canada. Yeah. Okay, so this is very much a northern Canada, apple.
You know, it was developed at University of Minnesota, so all those northern states grow it very well. Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, including Washington State, New York State. We're about at the fringe, and the reason is we battle sunburn where they don't as much. And when you have that one spot of sunburn, that's like the open invitation. The birds can smell it. We can't smell it or even sometimes see it, but the birds know it's there. The Japanese beetles know it's there, and they release, I guess, an attractant of some sort. But
wait, no, what is sunburn? I'm not familiar with that term. What happens there?
If the temperature gets above 95 degrees, it can affect a Honeycrisp fruit on the sunny side of it. And one of those reasons is the tree is so small, it lets in all the sun. Those exposed fruit, which is almost every single fruit, if it's 95 for 3, 4, or 5 days in a row, you may not be able to see that sunburn, but you'll know that it's there when it comes late August. But we're trying to combat that a few ways. We're thinking about putting up hail netting, which will be that tiny, tiny bit of shade that they would need on those hottest days. We've started to apply a product called Vapor Guard. Pretty simple science. It just blocks the sun. It
Sure.
washes off in the rain. You got to reapply it because it washes off so easy. So, things like that.
And by the way, everybody, I will post a video of what these look like on iowapodcast.com. I just took a long video of my wife walking down one of the rows. So I'll post that so people have a good idea of what it looks like. But I think most people don't have any clue how much maintenance and how much time you spend in the rows doing this stuff, because I would just assume you plant the apple trees and sure, that takes work and you got to water them and that kind of thing. But then they just kind of grow. And what you're telling me is you're dealing with the sun issues and putting up guards and, beetles and deer want to eat the apples. So there's a lot of moving pieces. Obviously, at a U-Pick orchard, it's not professionals picking these things. So there are, people don't pick them right. There are proper ways to pick an apple, which I'll ask you about. We'll touch on that briefly. But I'm a little surprised that there is a lot of fruit on the ground. People probably just pull on an apple and other apples fling off. But what do you do with that stuff? Is there anything you can do with that fruit that's lying all over the ground? Or do you just have to pretty much throw it in a ditch and compost it?
What you just said is exactly what we do. We pick it up off the ground and we make piles. I'm sure we have some deer hunters that are thankful for what we do. And, they harvest deer and give it to homeless shelters and things like that. But that's the only thing we can do. You can't make cider from fruit off the ground. We just have to dump it. And I get people asking all the time, can we come and pick up the apples off the ground? And I'm like, no, I can't. I can't allow you to do it. Once it hits the soil, I'm a commercial business. I can't let you buy it.
Oh, because there's risk there and bacterial growth and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, right.
Oh, that makes sense. One of the things I wanted to ask you about as well. Actually, real quick, before I ask this next question, how do you pick an apple really quick? Because this sounds like an obvious question, but there's not so obvious of an answer for everybody.
It does. Most people think you twist the apple. And so what we tell people, you do not pull it, you do not twist it, you roll the apple up. And what I mean by that is you put a finger on the top of the apple next to the stem and you roll the apple upside down, and it's an unnatural movement for that apple. And so that's how it rolls off without any vibration so that no other apples will drop. If you pull it or you twist it, you're not doing anything but shaking other apples on the ground. And, little kids, they don't quite understand the concept, but we try to educate them, when they check in, but it gets busy and we can't tell everybody or explain it to everybody. So
I'll be honest with you, Bryan. I think I was actually doing it kind of wrong. Don't tell anybody. Don't tell the owner or anything. But what I was doing is actually grabbing the stem right above the apple and holding that in position and then pulling the apple down. That way I didn't disturb the tree. So I'm assuming that's kind of okay, but the best way to do it is to roll it up is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, because you want the stem intact, but you don't want to take what's above the stem. That's actually the fruiting spur, and that's the fruit for next year.
Sure, that is fascinating. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I obviously didn't bring my chainsaw. I wasn't chopping down trees to pick. That's not the way to do it, or, launch yourself off a trampoline at the top and grab the apples as they come down and stuff them in your shirt. That's obviously not a good way to do it either. Yes. So when we were let's spend the next part of the interview talking about dumb things you've seen. No, I'm just kidding. Let's not do that. But when we were getting this interview scheduled, I was suggesting a few times, and 2 times you mentioned that you had special tour groups coming in there. So what are these tour groups? Are these educational groups, or who's coming to the orchard and what are they looking at?
Well, We don't do very many school tours, but we take everyone that wants to come with a minimum of 10 people. What we try to do is focus on those. I mean, we take any age, but the younger ones, we want them to understand, the colors of apples. There are red apples, and there are sweet red apples, and there are sour red apples, and we want them to taste that difference. So we give them a sample of two similar looking apples that would be red
That's cool.
or somewhat red. And then we say, when we explain to them, we pick an apple, we decide whether it's a good apple or whether it's a second. And if it's a second, it goes into a cider, or if it's a good pie apple, it gets peeled for pies. So then we give them a sample of our cider, and then we take them on a tractor ride to our little play area. And it's a little play area, but that age group loves it.
What I do like, there are a lot of apples. You have these rows, and there's a guide at the front that'll tell you which rows are ready for picking, and you have them marked with ribbons so people know what is in season. I'm assuming people should call ahead if they have a special apple they're going after to see if it's in season.
Yeah, that's a good idea. The key is only pick apples that have that orange ribbon that you referred to.
Right.
Because the other trees don't have their proper sugar development. They may look gorgeous and spectacular. Red Delicious, Gold Delicious, and Jana Gold. Those are the next ones on the list, and they're my prettiest apples, but they're not ready. They just don't have that flavor yet. So, yeah, just how you alluded to picking the rows with the orange ribbon that we've denoted. So
there's a story. I talked about this earlier, and hopefully we could have time to get into it. There is a story here. You mentioned the Urbandale and the Granger move. You weren't always in Granger. You had most of your orchard in Urbandale, right? So why the move?
Well, we had a property that was down further on Meredith Drive from our original property, which we still have. That's our main location. And we sold that, and and that was where we grew most of the apples, actually. Because our property in Urbandale right now on Meredith Drive is kind of small. So we knew we couldn't grow the amount of apples that we needed. So we did buy this property on Granger on Highway 141 in the year 2000, and because we needed a lot more production. And now I even resort to some rental orchards further north.
Wow.
We need apples. We've got 4,000 trees in Urbandale, 10,000 trees in Granger, and I have access to 20 more thousand trees at my rental orchards. There's a lot of fruit that we harvest every year, and we are usually selling apples mostly through the winter. We're open year round.
Your location in Urbandale would be open year round, right? Obviously,
yeah,
people aren't picking apples in the winter.
No, people will not be picking apples in the winter.
So when you say, I didn't know this was a thing. When you say rental orchard, is that like someone else's property and you're planting the trees and leasing that? Or is it someone else's trees and you're managing their trees? How does that relationship work?
Yeah, that's the scenario.
So it's someone else's tree.
It's their orchard. We collaborate in the care, but we get them harvested and get them down to our Urbandale store.
At the Urbandale store, you mentioned it's open year round. Mm-hmm. Is the apple picking season your busiest season, or is that not right?
Well, it's kind of funny. I don't have a very good sign out on the road that says Iowa Orchard on Meredith Drive. So what we like to do is we put about 2,000 to 3,000 pumpkins in the front yard, and then people get the idea of what we are. And so it's usually that Halloween season that the apples are so popular. But as you know, we make 35 kinds of pies, and we sell those year round. And like I said, the apples are through the winter until we run out of certain varieties. And usually Honeycrisp and Jonathan, which is what everybody wants in the winter, I have those. Those are the two we grow the most of.
What is the story on the pies? Because I think last time we were there, we had a couple donuts. You're trying some new donuts this year, by the way. You can go into that if you want to. But what's the story with all the goodies you have? Because I have had a half pie before, because, I'm trying to watch my sugar intake. And we had a caramel apple. What's the story on all these goodies?
Well, we actually, with a rolling pin, flour, and a cloth, we hand roll the top crust of over 15,000 pies a year. So It's a lot of work, but we have the flakiest crust that you will ever find on a pie. A lot of places will, no pun intended, but sugarcoat it with an egg wash and a granulated sugar, and that's to hide the machine-made crust and makes for a thicker crust. But anyway, so we've just keep expanding our pie operation. We expand it every year. We add new flavors. So
now I'm assuming all the apples in your pies are your apples, right?
Oh, exactly. Yeah. I don't grow enough black raspberries or
right.
gooseberries. And, so I do have to get fruit from Michigan. But even the cherries, we used to grow cherries, and the cherries I get from Michigan are the same variety that I grew. So, I mean, we know how to source our fruit. That's for sure.
So you have you have a growing network, and you look for other growers that care about the same things you do as a grower.
Absolutely.
Really quickly with our last minute, Iowa Orchard, obviously Granger. So it's just a short drive from me. I live in the east side of Des Moines, but not everybody lives in central Iowa. So this is probably unfair to some growers, but can you rattle off just a bunch of random orchards throughout the state you're aware of? Those might be a little closer to a listener.
Yeah, well, back in the 40s, Iowa used to be the largest apple growing state in the country.
Wow.
So a lot of these orchards have obviously gone. So I'm going to miss probably a lot of smaller orchards. But if you're on the east side of the state, I would say Wilson's Orchard in Iowa City. If you're on the west side, you've got Smalls and Dittmer's Orchard. They're in Mondamon and Council Bluffs, respectively. If you go north, there's Deals in Jefferson, Community Orchard in Fort Dodge, Center Grove in Cambridge. If you go a little bit west of Des Moines in Adel, there's Will's Family Farm. There's great orchards all over the state. You just need to get out and support them, especially now when they're in season.
Right.
That's the key to keeping agriculture alive in the state of Iowa. It's
Absolutely.
Kind of funny. I have a Secretary of Ag that lives 3 houses from my orchard.
That's really funny.
Mike Nag lives right real close.
Well, we'll try to get him on the show here in the future.
Yes.
We've been talking to his people, so hopefully we can get him on the show in the future. But for anybody trying to rapidly write down all those orchard names, don't worry about it. Just go to iowapodcast.com, and we will make sure to post all those orchards on this episode's page. Bryan Etchen, the CEO, Bryan Etchen, the owner of Iowa Orchard, thank you so much for coming on the Iowa Podcast. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's been too long, Justin. That's great. I love doing this. Thank you.
And to my fellow Iowans, Iowa expats, and Iowans at heart, thanks for listening and subscribing to the Iowa Podcast.